Hey everybody, welcome back to the channel. And if it's your first time here, welcome as well. And I hope this video is entertaining enough to earn a like and subscription. In today's episode of Dungeons & Dragons Horror Stories, we have a few tales that will make you have a newfound appreciation for your current games. But before we get into that, here's a video of some kitties to help boost morale before bringing it right back down. Ah, there we go. Now let's get right into these stories. My Wizard Exploding Caused the Ranger to Explode IRL by Reddit user Alma Elma. Spoilers for Rime of the Frost Maiden, Chapter 2. I played in a 5e game of Rime of the Frost Maiden among very good friends over Discord and Roll20. Our group was 6 party members strong and a lovable band of misfits. We had been traveling across Icewind Dale from town to town in this frozen wasteland, solving mysteries and stopping problems, as well as making a few of our own. We all had a good dynamic going, and it was generally positive, in spite of the tundra being cold and unforgiving. After moving on to yet another city after our successful hijinks, we had become well known enough for someone to actually seek out our help. Of course, being various flavors of good and neutral, we were excited to do some good and receive even more rewards. A gnome by the name of Copper Knobberknocker, wow, say that 3 times fast, which had a name as hilarious as his mannerisms, wanted to hire us to seek out a friend of his who lived in a secluded area outside of town. He had been working on a device that would end the Frost Maiden's eternal winter storm and finally provide light for the Dale, something that has been lost for many years now. This was big news to our party and a sign that we were moving on to the bigger parts of the campaign. We took up the job to deliver provisions and we check in on him immediately. The trip was simple, and much to our shock, his cabin had looked like it was in disrepair. It was absolutely ruined, and it was honestly a death trap. To even make our way inside, with the collapsing staircase and infrastructure of the cabin, me and the Goblin Rogue had decided to investigate the table surrounded by scorch marks with a suspiciously clean-looking object atop of it. I hadn't realized it, but the Rogue had gone AFK while I asked the DM questions and fiddled with the object. My character was very curious about this definitely magical object that continued to radiate light and become more erratic the more I fiddled with it. However, my character wasn't very insightful enough to consider that it was what caused the explosion, and after several interactions with the relic, it exploded and instantly vaporized both me and the rogue after a failed roll. This did not bother me or the rogue when they came back, as we both trusted that the DM had something in store for us and wouldn't instantly kill our characters for simply interacting with the world. This, however, didn't sit well with the Ranger. They immediately stopped the roleplay to accusingly yell at the DM. "Are you really doing this? Doing this to someone who wasn't even here?" The DM did not immediately respond, because we've never had the Ranger act like this before. It wasn't in her nature to be confrontational and aggressive. Before anyone could speak up, the Ranger disconnected from the Discord and was impossible to contact otherwise. We waited and tried for a full half hour before we resumed the game. The Rogue and I had a chance to speak with the spirit of the person who created the relic and died before getting to stabilize it, and we sort of helped guide our party through the completion of it as ghosts. Admittedly, it was a bit difficult, with the only person who didn't have intelligence dumped as a smoking crater, but still. With the relic properly finished, we managed to bring sunlight to the Dale again. It had been ages since anyone had seen it, and though it was very brief before the machine gave out, it had given everyone hope again. We were contacted and blessed by the god of the morning light, and the 2 of us who had been turned to ash were reborn anew. Unfortunately, all of this cool roleplay was sort of soured by our friend turning their backs on us and walking out before the DM even had a chance to explain themselves. Later, we talked to the Ranger, that said they were going through some issues that day, and it bled into the game. Apparently, they were just seeing red when that happened, and couldn't stop themselves, so they needed to just leave. We left it at that, though the DM had confided with me that he was very nervous for the next session, because he had planned a PC death. The player of the PC wasn't very happy with his monk, and wanted to swap out to a warlock, so the DM wanted to have the maiden show up and personally mess with us for our successes. Thankfully, it went a lot better than that session. TLDR, my character explodes because they're smart and not wise, and then Ranger explodes IRL and rage quits the call because they think the DM is being a dick. Thanks for reading. Well, it's good to hear that this behavior was a one-off from Ranger. I know we all have our bad days, but you should try to do your best to not take it out on people around you that have nothing to do with it. Though, I would say that during an RP moment that heavily involves someone who could and probably would change the situation were they present, it would have probably been best for DM to wait for that player to get back before killing off both characters. At least Ranger apologized, and they were able to move forward in their campaign. Let's move on, and just a heads up for this next story, as it contains mentions of suicidal thoughts. So if you would like to skip to the next story, go to this time code here, or check the chapters. But with that said, let's get into it. DM forces my character to have a baby, by Reddit user Thigh Guy with a Tie. Back in 2018, I jumped into a 3.5e game. Other than a one-shot, this was the first campaign I had ever been in. My best friend brought me in because they needed another player. I made a paladin, but within 2 sessions, the DM killed him in a random encounter. He offered to help me roll another character, so I made a female elven ranger, and I named her Kay. I played her like a chaotic good tomboy, intent on helping to build a kingdom for all people who want to live in peace. He started to get weird almost immediately. I took fletching as one of my crafts, but he never let me make my own arrows, nor was I able to buy them. His excuse was always either, "There is no shopkeeper," or, "They do not have any arrows." Then, every encounter, it seemed, there were grapple checks that I couldn't beat. In one memorable encounter, a bear pinned my character, and he described how the bear was biting your tits. And then there were the tentacles. It didn't go that far, but it was enough to start to get weird. Cut to the end of the campaign, and he offers us a new campaign in the same world, but a few decades into the future. We would be able to play our own children as player characters, but he made us roll for gender. I rolled and got female. That wouldn't have bothered me, except my character had brothers. Why couldn't I play one of them? Rather than fight, I let it slide. I named her E, and I played her much like I did K, tomboy as fuck, not big on the flirting, and chaotic good, with the intent of keeping the kingdom safe for all people. I was hoping to be the new sheriff and let K, my mother, retire. In the previous campaign, we had built a kingdom. Let's call it Nev. We had also become allies with a nation of dragons and kobolds. Let's call it Hej. One of the player characters, let's call him B, was from Hej. There were portals connecting the 2 capitals of each nation, so you would think that these 2 countries were close allies, right? During travel, we heard that Hej had invaded Nev. There was some tension between our characters for a minute, but we hashed it out and decided to try to stop the war. It turns out that the DM was trying to force PvP on us. My character's mother, Kay, was one of the high-ranking people on the front lines. I begged and rolled the highest diplomacy I could muster, but she wouldn't be persuaded to peace talks. This was pretty irritating, because I had always sought the diplomatic solutions first when I was playing her. Push came to shove, and so in order to stop the war, I poisoned her in her sleep. My character had to kill her mother, and I, as a player, had to kill my former character. This was upsetting because I had really liked her. I had never played Kay as an unreasonable person. Violence was always the last resort. Sorry, I'm one of those people who prefer RP over combat, but I'm never afraid to throw hands. Our army falls, and Hej successfully takes over Nev and installs their own government. I try to roll with the punches and make a new character arc. E develops a drinking problem. I don't know if that was a good idea or not. I felt that it might fit the character, and sobriety would give me a goal to reach for. Basically, a story. I'm sorry if that offends anyone who has a drinking problem or any substance problems. I've been there myself, and I'm coming up on 7 years sober. Woo! E and B were requested to teach some kobolds how to use rifles. My character has a few drinks and shows up to the range, and the DM has me roll a dex save. I shoot a kobold and kill him. I admit, the tragic drunk character arc probably wasn't the way to go. Part of me thinks I was just playing how I felt. I was pretty bummed out after poisoning my previous character because of what seemed like a contrived confrontation between people who had always been friends. I show up to Dragon Court, and the DM asks B how they would deal with this kind of issue. They respond with, "Normally they would be removed from the group, but they would die in the wild. It's effectively a death sentence." Or, the DM chimes in, giggling as he's saying this, "She could replace the kobold." "How?" I ask. "You have a child with the kobold's brother." "My choices are to die or have his child." "I guess." B and I went over a few ideas, but I didn't want to be a killjoy. I respond with, "Fuck it, I go fuck the kobold." I have no idea why I gave up, rather than confront the DM. I'm not gonna lie, that pissed me off. I tried to stick around after the session to have a chat with my DM, but he was busy talking to the other players. He called me later on to ask if I was okay with what was going on. I should have been honest and said no, but again, I didn't want to be a killjoy. I told him everything's fine, but to expect a pretty bad response from E, who was not going to have a good time. In game, I started writing a book with the intention of leaving it behind to the child. Basically, it was going to be advice about growing up, to be nice to people and stick up for them, and offer a believable story about why their mother was no longer around. And then, after giving birth to the child, I was going to, in game of course, put my revolver to my head and pull the trigger. B caught on and convinced my character not to go through with it. From then on, every time the DM cut to me to ask what E was doing, I always said, "I sit in my room and twiddle my thumbs." The only time E did anything worthwhile was when the other players needed help with killing some monster or going into a dungeon. Finally, E gives birth. She does not kill herself, and the campaign lasts another 2 or 3 sessions. And then it's over because the DM gets bored. He asks us to make new characters, and I drop out. I told them that I was too busy. I know I shouldn't have let it get that far, but I just didn't want to rock the boat, I guess. The DM learned nothing, of course, because he started picking on B with all the tentacle stuff. That campaign didn't last very long after B started standing up for himself. I have no idea why I'm writing this. I just know I keep feeling like E is stuck in limbo somewhere. I keep thinking about her. Maybe it's the current political situation. I don't know. Every fiber of my being keeps telling me I should have pulled the trigger. At least then, I would have gotten some closure. Anyway, there you go. That's the story. And I'm sorry. Edit. I want everyone to know that Key and E are safe with new names in my campaigns. They got their happy endings, due in part to my players. They're going to be just fine. I also want you to know that if you want to use this post in your YouTube videos, you have my full permission. I do, and I did. Also, I want to thank all of you. I think I needed to talk about it. Well, the main problem in this story, I think, boils down to the lack of communication. Yes, some things that the DM came up with were questionable, but at the same time, OP just rolled with it, not wanting to rock the boat, so to speak. If you are uncomfortable with something in a game, just say something. No one's a mind reader, and if they are a good DM, they will listen. Though, it sounds like this DM might not have been a good one, since it sounds like he killed the campaign after one of the players actually did say something. Though, those are just my thoughts. What are yours? Let's move on. Why is it always Curse of Stahd? By Reddit user DazzlingAd4756. Back when I was a brand new baby DM, I decided to run Curse of Stahd as my very first campaign. I loved everything about it and was very excited to start it. I asked around my friend group for players and got a nice party set up. We got a few sessions in before Bard had to leave because the player was literally leaving the country. In his place, his friend joined, and this is the problem player. We will call him Grave Cleric. Warning for Curse of Stahd spoilers ahead. This guy shows up with an insane 3-class build: Grave Cleric, Druid, and Warlock ASMR, which I kind of still don't know how it worked. We were also level 6 when he joined. Grave Cleric kept telling me he would give me his backstory, and never did, and I also never got to see his character sheet. I was new, didn't know any better, and thought it wasn't going to be a problem. In the first session, we come across a windmill. Here, he refused to go in while the others did, to talk to the nice old ladies who were offering them pies. Fighter had the deed of the windmill and was trying to make a business plan with the ladies. Grave Cleric, while still outside by himself, used magic to detect evil, sensed evil from inside the windmill, and then proceeded to try and destroy the windmill, with the rest of the party still inside it. This triggered an incredibly hard fight that downed the paladin, and they had to run away. Moving on to Valakai, they were at the Blue Water Inn. The Grave Cleric served the Raven Queen. He had a Raven familiar, and ravens had been shown at least 3 times to be good, helpful creatures to the party. In particular, this Raven, Muriel in Raven form, was watching them from a tree. This guy blasted her without hesitation, and as the Raven turned back to a person, he immediately froze her legs with magic and pulled out knives to start to torture her before the others stopped him. Muriel was injured, the Martikovs were not happy, I was dumbfounded, and the party was annoyed with Grave Cleric. Next, they were trying to sneak into the Burgomaster's mansion, and Grave Cleric got caught. When asked what he was doing by the guards, he just spread his stupid ASMR wings like that would do anything, and was put in jail for the night. The rest of the party was going to come and get him. They were trying to bribe a guard into letting him out, but Grave Cleric thought it was going badly and panicked. He used Fireball on his cell and burned down the jail, killing 3 guards trying to escape. The party then had to flee the city. Fighter was very angry and threatened to kill Grave Cleric's character if he did not chill the fuck out. Here I had a talk with the player, and he promised to do better. Finally, what broke me. They got to Van Richen's tower, which had an anti-magic field on it. Once again, Grave Cleric refused to go inside because of the anti-magic field and stood outside, while the others did all of the puzzles and got to the top. Once again, Grave Cleric tried to destroy the tower. For being anti-magic, I don't really know why. But Fighter threatened him out of character if he tried. When they left, they were attacked by a group of werewolves, and after the fight, they found Esmeralda, who had been captured and tied up. Grave Cleric refused to untie her and tried to torture her into giving him information, and also stole her things. Thankfully, the rest of the group stopped him, again, from torturing her, but she was, of course, upset. Grave Cleric threatened her, but failed his intimidation roll, and Esmeralda called him a little man. Grave Cleric looks at me and says, "I kill her." Esmeralda, who was their ally in the card reading, then had her throat slit. The other players were mad, and I had had enough. I kicked him and never played Curse of Stahd again. I was very inexperienced, and I didn't know how to handle players who acted like this. I know now that I could have done more to stop this, or should have put my foot down on his antics, but hindsight is 20/20 and all that. Grave Cleric was definitely acting like a that guy, and it was obvious that he was hampering the fun of the other players, and he just didn't care. Instead, he continued to go murder hobo until the game eventually ended. Thankfully, it sounds like OP has learned from this experience. Have you ever had a player in a game just go a tad too over the top? If so, and would like your story to be told on the channel, feel free to post it in the comments, on the D&D Doge subreddit, or even just at me on Twitter. As always, I appreciate all of you, and may all of your rolls be natural 20s. Until next time.